Welcome.
I
Oh,
didn't have
wow.
any I didn't have any nice ciders today, so
Well, I
a little
ran
bit of
out
Kahlua
completely.
and some shitty ass vodka.
Oh, there you go.
I normally save the Black Russians for special occasions, but I guess episode 1, take
Oh,
2 is
yeah,
kind of a special occasion.
yeah. Episode zero point 0.5. Let's hope that it works out. Yeah, so I have a cup of coffee today because I ran out of all of the liquor in my house last week and meant to go shopping and didn't. So there's what's
Caffeine
what.
is something you can be under the influence of.
That's true.
You
It's
had one
true.
job, Telson. It's in the show title.
Oh, I know, right?
How you been, man?
Under I'm under the influence of a round of golf yesterday. Day before yesterday? What's today? Sunday? Sunday, right?
Hmm.
I golfed on Friday because the course opened.
And how
And
was
I
it?
was reminded that I am no longer 18 because I still hurt.
It's funny how you have to remind yourself that every year.
Oh man, every day I wake up and I think, I'll just go for a run. Why do my feet hurt? Why do my knees hurt? Why does my everything hurt? Yeah, gray in the beard, I guess. So, what have you been up to?
Well, I'm sure you've heard, but the Toronto Maple Leafs have won a
I
playoff
have.
round for the first time in 19 years.
It's
And I have
2004.
to say, it's funny, right? Like, I'm a diehard Leafs fan. I
Yeah.
watched the last one in 2004, and I've watched every attempt since. It happened last night, and it was surreal. Like, enjoyed the shit out of it. Was up like till 1, 2 in the morning, even just looking at my Twitter feed, looking at people celebrating downtown Toronto. It was all very like tasteful. We're not talking Vancouver riots in 2011 kind of shit. Like it was, people
who
just
who can afford to do
ultimate
that these days?
catharsis, like the curse is off not only the back of the Toronto Maple Leafs, but their fans, the people that have suffered and stuck with it for as long as they have. But then I had a moment when I woke up this morning and I was like, did that actually happen? Did I dream it? I must have been dreaming about some adjacent shit because I was questioning myself in the morning and I had to get up, I had to look at my news feed, make sure everything that I'd thought happened because that would have sucked.
Yeah,
Could you
I don't know.
imagine dreaming that the Toronto Maple Leafs finally did something only to find out that you were dreaming and they still suck and
I
are
here
cursed?
here's the funny thing. I haven't followed hockey since Gretzky left Edmonton. I think I've told you that before. And I was never like a really big diehard fan. Like I'll watch, the Stanley Cup or the playoffs if Toronto's playing. So this has sort of cued me to find a place to watch hockey. I'm thinking actually there's a sports bar like literally across the parking lot from where I live. So I might just head down there, whenever hockey is happening. Is hockey night in Canada still a thing?
It is. It's not strictly speaking a CBC thing right now. It's a production that's put on by Rogers. CBC still broadcasts it. It's not what it used to be.
Yeah, well, it never is. But I mean, like I just haven't. I think I watched in 2004 because I remember being like impressed by the fact that it's the end of the second period and these guys are still playing. Because up until that point, I mean, like the joke was first period, and then they just kind of go, meh.
Hmm.
Like the thing is like as I say, I haven't followed it really closely, but the Leafs haven't ever really sucked. They've just always been not quite good enough.
Yes. And with the way the league works, with how the draft works and prioritizing that, that's the worst place to be, right? Like that muddy middle where you don't qualify for the dance and you're not so bad that you're benefiting from being bad and earning, good cracks at a top pick. Now, the Leafs had 1 year where it was very clear that that's what they were doing. They happened to win the lottery once. And then they've had since then, half a dozen years of utter futility in which they qualify for the playoffs. Not necessarily favored to win. There's been a couple of seasons where they were, and then like the 18 wheeler just drives right off the cliff. And
Yeah.
Like sometimes you're just like, it's a curse, you know? Like there's no other explanation for this. The odds are so statistically overwhelmingly against this ever happening. And they still find a way.
Well, like the Cubs ended their drought, which was what, 104 years? And I actually thought when that happened, I actually thought to myself, first of all, Back to the Future predicted it down to the year, which is hilarious. Just a coincidence, but still hilarious. But I thought to myself, well, it must be like, who has the longest standing drought now? And it's got to be the Leafs, right? Because I mean, 67 was the last time anything good happened, and it's
Yeah.
not. It's not. There's a couple of NFL teams that have never won. And there was someone else too. There's a couple of sort of like secondary type leagues stuff where people are still over like they're over 100 years now, because when the Cubs won, it was at like 96 or 97 years. So anyway, yeah.
We're not
So I have
actually
to.
a sports podcast,
Oh God,
just to
no.
make it clear. It's This is a once in a lifetime experience for me. I am one of the few nerds that is also a I wouldn't say a big sports fan in the general sense. I'm a Leafs fan. I'm a hockey fan, a Leafs fan.
No, no, you're a Leafs fan. You're not a hockey fan.
Touche.
Yeah,
So
and
you
and
had
I know
something you wanted to get into.
I did. I have two things actually. The first of all is that I have to say that I'm also a Leafs fan. I'm not a big fan of hockey. Um, I made homemade lasagna today from scratch. Like I made my own noodles. And
Ooh.
oh yeah, like I started from raw tomatoes and egg and flour, and I made the noodles and I cooked the noodles, and I made a vegetarian lasagna, and it was absolutely delicious. I had
Nice.
no
Now,
idea. I have no
now you
idea
say
that
noodles. Last I
noodles. Yeah, we're not exactly keto.
Okay.
This was
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we were trying to go like we're trying to lower our carb intake from sort of the standard.
Mm-hmm.
So like noodles are a once a week thing as opposed to like every night.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted like I found, hey, vegetarian lasagna. I would really like to make my own noodles. I'm gonna try it. It's gonna be like this big production, and it's literally like make a mound of flour, put an egg in it, mix it up, go let it sit for a half
So
an hour, roll it out.
not neither do you or your wife are vegetarians, so why
Nope.
vegetarian lasagna?
Just to try it, just to see.
Yeah.
It would probably be improved by putting meat in it, or beyond meat, or whatever you wanted
Hmm.
to do. The other thing is
Yeah,
that
because
I've
in
been
my go
sorry,
ahead.
go ahead.
I was-
We have some serious lag issues going on. Boobies.
Anyway, I was
Uh,
just gonna say in my head, uh, vegetarian lasagna is like up there with non-alcoholic beer. It almost defeats the purpose.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it depends on sort of what level of vegetarian you are, right? Like I am not a level 5 vegan. I don't pocket mulch. Uh, so like I put cottage cheese in it. There was mozzarella and parmesan on top. But just like lots of vegetables. And part of the reason is that I have been watching some research about. It's really funny. This was like absolutely not in the list of topics to talk about, but it's interesting nonetheless. I've been paying attention to a little bit of research from oh my, I cannot remember where. I think he's out of the UK somewhere. But they've been doing studies. They did studies on twins, and like one twin has this kind of diet, and the other twin has that kind of diet, and sort of like what kind of health situation are they in. And there's a large amount of not quite anecdotal evidence, but not exactly 100% backed by statistical science, that says the larger the amount and variety of vegetable matter you eat, the healthier you are. So it's not about like not eating meat, it's about just eating more and more different kinds of vegetables.
I
So
mean, that makes sense.
doesn't it?
You know, we grew up learning that you should eat your veggies, and I'm sure that that was for a reason. And I know there are, specifically speaking, eating too much meat carries its own health risks, especially
Yeah.
red meats.
Yep. Especially awful.
Mm.
Yeah.
But if
So
it was good, I guess, that's all that matters.
yeah, so it's about a way of making vegetables a little bit more interesting. It was less work than I expected too. Like I was expecting to be laboring for hours, and it was some work. Like don't get me wrong, making your own noodles is intense, but
Mhm.
I mean I started cooking at 10:30 and we ate at 1, so
That's not too bad.
yeah. And I mean I took several breaks to go and run a regular rift in Diablo, so it's not like I was working the whole time. It was like 15 minutes of work, a half an hour of sitting around waiting for something to cook, with the exception of the veggies, which Cindy cooked. So, or sorry, not the veggies, the noodles,
Mhm.
because delicate process, probably not my forte.
Oh.
Yeah. So the thing that I actually wanted to talk about is I don't know. I feel like it should go on /r. I'm 14 and this is deep, but it like I wanted to talk about why we feel the need to name everything. Why everything has to go into a bucket. Why you know and the simple analogy is the tomato, right? Like it's a fruit based
Mhm.
on how we define fruits, but at the same time, like you don't put it in a fruit salad, we use it like a vegetable, right? Like we put it in spaghetti sauce, for example. You probably wouldn't put peaches in a spaghetti sauce. I mean, you might. It might be good. Who knows?
Mhm.
But like, where and how do we come up with the idea of who is responsible for choosing the names of things? And more importantly, why does it matter? Right? And the sort of serious side of that is that we do that with people, right? We choose a characteristic of people and then say you are this, a color, a race, a creed, a sex, and say this is what you're like based on that one characteristic.
Mhm.
And it's almost always wrong.
It
Well, maybe not
is.
almost always, but frequently enough.
It's infrequently factually wrong, often ethically wrong, based on how that
Yeah.
information is used. Once you've sort of established the
Well,
nomenclature, right, and how you categorize things.
yeah. Well, you
I
get into all kinds of weird things about like because nobody is 100% anything,
No, of
really.
course not.
So, right? Like, so how do you
And I was
decide
listening.
which bucket?
Yeah, and I know I've recommended listening to Dan Carlin before, to
That's
you.
the hardcore history?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and he recently did. I can't remember if it was in his addendum feed. I think it might have been. He recently did something about the idea of nationalities and heritages and stuff, right? And when you look at like the entire span of human history, at least anatomically modern human history, you're going back hundreds of thousands of years. Let's just
Mm,
pick 300,000 for a nice round number. And when we think about going back and looking at our heritages, which sort of nationalities we descended from, which groups of people, ethnicity, we're thinking back hundreds of years, maybe 1,000 years, two
maybe.
thousand years, kind of tops. Biblical times, maybe even a little bit before for those really old ethnicities. But the reality is that represents such a small sliver, not even in just geologic time, right? But in the time that anatomically modern humans have been here, moving around the planet, forming groups, forming other groups, joining other groups, that to sort of arbitrarily pick that cutoff of, well, this is sort of where recorded history starts. And I guess that makes these ethnicities, these nation states, these names, these words
Hmm.
important because
Uh, well, okay, so two things. There's a little bit to unpack there, but there's two things.
yeah,
Number
yeah.
one, I do think that having like whatever your identity is, whether it's like because quite frankly, we're both Canadian, right?
Mhm.
And I don't think that we can go back thousands of years as Canadians. Maybe you can. I can't. Like my grandparents on both sides immigrated to Canada in like the early-ish 1900s. So we've been here like 100 years, my family,
Hmm.
and like I still, and I still do sort of like, speaking personally, go back and go, okay, like most of my family is from like England and Ireland and Germany, which like doesn't make me English or Irish or German, and that sort of gets me into my other point. It is sort of important to recognize that some people have an identity that they go, this is who I am, and that's, that's not really what I'm getting at. The other thing is that it's even more arbitrary than the idea of like what time cutoff do we use, because
Hmm.
we have this idea about, hey, hundreds of years ago people lived in a village and they never left their village, and that's absolute horseshit. Like people traveled around all over the place, right? And especially
Absolutely.
if you consider sort of my genetic background from England and Ireland and Germany, like those are places that were invaded frequently. So I guarantee you that if some of my family have done the 43andMe type thing. I haven't
Hmm.
bothered because I'm not all that bothered about giving somebody money to tell me who I am. I am who I am, and that's it. But they were all expecting it to come back, this, that, and the other thing, and it comes back, like 2% Spanish and 1% this and some percent that and some percent the other thing, and there's stuff from East Asia, right? Like you think about the landmass that is Europe, we think, or we're sort of taught, this is Europe, but Europe is connected to Russia and China and India, and all of the sort of Northern Asian, Southern Asian, Eastern Asian countries by land.
Hmm.
And a certain percentage of human people get wanderlust and just go, you know what, I'm going to go that way, and they just walk.
Hmm.
And I mean, I'm pretty sure that human beings, in the far past were horny too. So chances are babies were made from cross continents. So,
Absolutely. And it's funny that you mentioned the genetic profiling, like the 23andMe stuff, because that is how, if I recall correctly, Dan Carlin kicked off his episode about this.
oh,
Is like
okay.
back before sort of ancestry.com, in the early days of that stuff, he'd received uh, one of those as a gift and opted to kind of go through and do it, and then got back sort of a dissatisfying answer
Uh
based
huh.
on what he was expecting to get. But after, decades since then, it's really forced him to rethink a lot of things.
Well, and I guess part of it for me is that like all of that doesn't matter, right? Like it's not. It's important to have an identity of who you are, but I think it's important too to well, and to sort of tie it back to like the Leafs, right? The Leafs are from Toronto. How many of the players who play for the Toronto Maple Leafs grew up in Toronto?
Because of the popularity of hockey in Canada, and in Ontario specifically being sort of the highest population center of the country, relative to other teams, a surprising
Yeah.
number,
Yeah, but still, it's not all
but
of them.
still, no, no,
No.
not even a majority, right?
Yeah, and that's kind of my point is that like just because, you know, y- like you identify as, Irish doesn't mean that you should identify more with, like, I don't know. I just find the idea, especially, with news coming from the South about like hyper nationalism really taking off, and like national pride, and I'm like, shouldn't we kind of be worried about our species first? Make sure that the planet works for people to live on.
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't know.
No, I'm not a scientist, so let me get that disclaimer out there. Um,
But you are a scienceologist.
yes, I'm a fan of science as much as I'm a fan of history. So I'm going to make some wild speculations here that may or may not reflect anything resembling truth. I would imagine that if you look at us, human beings, probably even sort of earlier human races, um, we certainly see it in other species today. So it makes sense that it would have evolved and developed in some of our ancestral races, but or ancestral species, I should say. I think of things uh, like I'll go back even further. Let's talk about life in general. I think about life in general as almost like a chemical inevitability, right? Like you create an environment where chemical reactions can happen. Those reactions are going to eventually, over time, grow more and more complex to the point where you have something capable of replicating itself. That process evolves and evolves to the point where you end up with the basics of life. I believe that there's life out there somewhere else. I don't think it necessarily is advanced multicellular life. I don't think necessarily that it is, intelligent life in the way that we would define it. I mean, that's a possibility, but I think in the chemistry of the universe, life is an inevitability that probably doesn't just happen once. Now, thinking about our own evolution, I think that as certain evolutionary traits develop that have evolutionary advantages, we have to live with the consequences of those. I don't want to use the term decisions, but those
Results.
forks in the road that have
Ah.
happened, right? So,
Mhm.
the developing of a primitive brain that is then capable of primitive pattern recognition. Like that forms the sort of basis for categorization of stimuli, right? The things I see, the things I hear, how do I organize them into things so that I can make sense of them? And, over a long enough period of time, uh, further evolution, enhancements of those traits, selective pressures, which really hone those traits into very specific things, you end up with where we are now. Now we don't have the same selective pressures, evolutionary kind of environmental pressures that we would have had back then. We have some, but we have, we're still the tools that we were honed by nature to be. And things like pattern recognition, the cognition and things that drive categorization of things, grouping similar things so that you can take mental shortcuts, right?
Mhm.
Whether it's things that slither are dangerous. Now, not all snakes are venomous, but a lot of people
Most of
don't
them are
like snakes.
poisonous, though.
Yeah, and that has been a driver of our survival as a species. And now we're not walking around in dense forests and jungles stepping on snakes every day, but those
People are still
same
freaked out by snakes.
well, yeah, and those same mechanisms, that lead to us reacting to things like snakes in a certain way, or having involuntary sort of responses to the smell of like rancid meat or something like that. Like those are still in here, you know, and
Mhm.
our brains just do what they will with it. So I think that's the big driver of categorization, the need to name things, the need to group things based on some arbitrary similarity. To go back to your tomato fruit thing,
Mm.
the question is tomato a vegetable or a fruit depends on whom you ask.
And that's kind of the point that
Hmm.
like that's sort of the meta narrative that I was thinking about was, yeah, absolutely. We're definitely driven by our experiences to put things into boxes.
Hmm.
I guess, and it also makes it much easier to communicate things in a timely fashion. Like you wouldn't want to, if you're going to describe somebody,
Hmm.
you don't start with like, this is their genetic makeup, or this is their name, this is what their fingernails look like you give a physical description, and that sort of narrows things down until you get to an individual. But I guess the sort of one level up of that is that, describing, to use the tomato, describing it as a fruit or a vegetable really, in a lot of circumstances, isn't helpful, right? Like it's a tomato. Who cares if it's a fruit or a vegetable? Chop it up and put it in your salad, but not your fruit salad, right? So,
Well, why wouldn't you put it in your fruit salad if you don't care if it's a
well,
fruit
I
or a
do,
vegetable?
I do, well, that's just the thing, is that I don't care whether we call it a fruit or a vegetable. You can call it meat if you want to. right? My point is that the individual thing is the individual thing, and it's a handy mental shortcut or a handy shortcut of communication to say, like, you bring me a tomato, right? But you wouldn't say, bring me any random fruit, because you would probably not get what you wanted. Um, but it's the sort of thing I'm trying to drive at, I guess, is that calling a tomato a fruit doesn't tell you everything that you need to know about it. And especially, today we have far too many things to keep track of. Like, there's just way too much information flying past us. And those shorthands often do us a disservice in actually trying to understand the truth of things. So, you know, uh, yeah, I'm trying to think of an example that isn't like super offensive to somebody, and
Hmm.
I don't have any. And that's the point. That's the point I'm trying to get at, is that when you try and describe something, when you look at headlines, right, the descriptions of people are like, why did you go with that? Right? Like, why did you describe that person that way, and why does it matter?
Hmm. So I think the interesting way of exploring this from my perspective is, I mean, I understand how and why we categorize things, and I agree that everything's fuzzy, and often those sort of categorizations aren't super helpful.
Hmm.
You know, for instance, if you look at some of the 1970s, 1980s food guide stuff, even though scientifically we categorize tomato as a fruit, it falls into the vegetable group for the purpose of nutrition guides and things like that, right?
Hmm. Yep.
So that's why I say it depends on whom you ask.
Depends
What
on your
I find,
perspective.
absolutely. Now, what I find interesting is, as humans, we are capable of so many things. So this need to categorize and this need to tribalize things
Hmm.
when you put them together, I find particularly interesting. It's certainly not helpful. And the obvious things that comes to my mind is the categorization of the celestial body in our solar system named Pluto. For a very long time, it was referred to as a planet. And then in the past 20 years or so, it was recategorized based on sort of scientific,
It didn't fit on somebody's spreadsheet, is what happened.
right, characteristics that, they needed to define. Well, now that we know that there's a lot of shit up there, what do we mean when we say the word planet? What do we mean when we say something else, like a moon or a star or a dwarf planet or something like that? And I don't need to get into the nitty gritty of why they decided to go, demote Pluto from planet. I mean, I agree with it scientifically, but what I find interesting is the amount of people that were
Personally
personally
offended.
attacked and
Yeah.
offended, right?
Yeah.
Like they've now formed a tribe behind, Pluto's a planet,
Yep.
and somebody saying otherwise about something that is completely insignificant, like Pluto being a planet versus, aside from maybe some textbooks that are out of date, planet, dwarf planet, like what impact does it have on your daily life?
Absolutely none.
So
None.
I find it, another evolutionary sort of
Yeah.
inevitability, our tribalism based on sort of forming communities and families, and its impact on increased survival and stuff, has led us to a point where we become sports fans. Like I become a Toronto Maple Leafs fan. I'm part of that tribe.
Uh, yep.
And if you're a Sens fan or a Habs fan, like screw you. Like
Yeah. Well,
we're at
that's
war now.
yeah, but that's and then this is the weird thing that I find, right? Is that, like, in any one of those sort of self-appointed tribal associations, right? Because you
Hmm.
chose to be a Maple Leafs fan.
Hmm.
I did too, and it largely, it's funny because I was actually living in Saskatchewan when I was a kid, and the reason that I chose the Maple Leafs is because Toronto is my dad's hometown,
Hmm.
right? And I'm like, I'm just obsessed with everything Toronto. Toronto looks so awesome. Toronto's amazing. And then I went there and realized, not as much. Um, but like, yes, so there's a couple of things in there. The we sort of appoint ourselves to a tribe, say these are all of my people, and everyone who believes differently is wrong and a terrible person. And that kind of sums it up. Is that right? Like I'm a Maple Leafs fan too, kind of. Like I said, I don't really follow hockey anymore. But if somebody asked me like, "What team are you cheering for?" It's like, well, it's the Maple Leafs, and if they're not playing, then I'm not watching. Um, but like, if somebody says, "Oh, well, I'm a Sens fan," okay, it's a perfectly valid choice. Like, you do you. We don't need to
Mhm.
be enemies. We're not enemies, right? Like, we might be competitors, but we're not enemies.
But it's
And
funny
but
you
there's
say
there
that, like, that makes absolutely logical sense. Hey,
and it
you've
does,
chosen to be a fan or a fanatic
yeah.
about something different than me, but the reality is there's a significant part of the population, our species, that doesn't just say, hey,
They go over
I'm
the
I'm a
top.
part of a trivial tribe, right? Like, this is a funsies, don't take it too seriously tribe, and yeah, oh, Sens fans, screw you guys. But I mean, you
I
don't have
mean,
to, I don't want this to turn into a political debate, but like, you just, you don't even have to look south of the border. You can look
oh
sort of
yeah,
north of the border and see it
yep,
in our systems too. Like,
absolutely.
it's
Red versus blue, man. It's red versus blue.
us versus others. It's just,
That's an interesting point, is that like I came to the conclusion a while ago that like there is like good versus evil. Like we're definitely fed a narrative that says like, we're the good guys and they're the bad guys. But if you look at it, every single faction of anything anywhere will tell themselves we are the good guys and they are the bad guys. So it's not so much good versus evil. I mean, you could make an argument that yes, um, more just motivations and less just motivations, but in any particular circumstance, it's us versus them, and who us is and who them is depends on where you're standing. And I think that if the larger, sort of portion of humanity could understand that, there would be an awful lot less gestures vaguely at everything.
so let's take this out. I actually wanted to get into a conversation one of these shows about aliens, the idea of them, what would happen if we ever ran into them, talk about
Game over,
things.
man. Game over.
No, talk about things like the Fermi paradox and the idea of great filters and whatnot. But we won't get into that tangent
Yeah,
now.
you
But
need to give me a chance to do some homework before we do that.
no, 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 no. But if aliens arrived tomorrow, like in an undeniable, they're just here. Let's talk Independence Day. Maybe they're not as hostile as is in those movies, but
Probably
aliens
not.
show up, and we have a new high bar for the meaning of the word other.
Ooh.
Does humanity as a species start to look at itself as a common tribe when
Yes
faced with
and
an
no.
ultimate other?
Yes and no. I think that based on the experiences that we've had with situations like that in the past, that we would find that the majority of humanity would stand together arm in arm and say it's us versus them, and us as humans and them is whoever just showed up. But there would be a small but significant portion of the population who would say, well, I'm with them, and we're better than you guys. And I think that's sort of the default state of humanity.
It's true.
We should move on to something lighter. It's starting to become
Yeah.
depressing.
I don't know. I mean, yes, it is depressing when you sort of you develop this sense of like predeterminism, right? Like, if all of this negativity is tied to sort of evolutionary directions that we have as a species took hundreds of thousands, millions of years ago, maybe even more.
I mean, the Earth has
Um,
only been here for 3,000 years, man.
yes, yes,
Sorry,
absolutely.
that's just the truth. Slash S.
The top half of the flat part of Earth, right?
Oh, yeah, the stuff inside the ring of ice.
Yeah. Okay. That's just, you got to ask.
uh,
All right. So we've been talking about well, we kind of got talking about aliens and stuff. So let's take that to the next topic. One thing that I wanted to talk about was one of my favorite, and I'm going to use quotation marks here, sci-fi series, Firefly.
Sci-fly.
Sci-fi. There's been rumors. Um,
Are you serious?
there has been rumors. I don't know if they're well-founded rumors.
Hmm.
Certainly Nathan Fillion has made comments to the effect of, well, if I won the lottery, I would buy the rights to Firefly and make a show.
Doesn't he already have go fuck yourself money?
I mean, he's, he, I love Nathan Fillion. I love him in basically everything he's ever done. I even tried to watch Castle for a while, and I mean, that got terrible.
Castle was actually pretty good up until the last season.
Yeah.
We got to the last season. We literally watched the first episode and went, okay, this ended last season. It was a good place to end it. They got married. Oh, spoilers.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. It was basically, when it was still will they or won't they, it was good. When they
And
decided they did, then
they did it wrong. And I know
yeah.
we're
Okay.
tangenting the question, but yes, like we need to do this because it's important. Like
Hmm.
Castle is cutting edge. This is like modern day nerdism. Um, it would have been fine if yes they did, and they continued doing the kind of thing that they were doing, only now with married bickering while they were doing it. But they
Hmm.
they got married, and now we're going to keep them married but retcon the whole situation, so now that she's a spy and he's got to kind of try and get into her spy life the same way he did into her cop life.
Yeah.
And that was dumb.
And it probably didn't help that I think the actors absolutely loathed each other.
Well, they didn't get along. I know that. I mean that's well documented. There's
Mhm.
some Hollywood rumors about like they loathed each other. And I don't know if that's the case. I think it's probably just that it's like, you know what? We don't really like each other.
Which is fine.
I
But
mean, that happens.
you can't have a middle ground. Like you either love somebody or you hate them.
This is a topic for another show. We need to write this down where the internet does not have any kind of scale. It's literally the internet has turned humanity binary. It's either the literal greatest thing that has ever happened or it is the end of the world and there's nothing in between.
Mhm.
Like there is literally nowhere on the internet that you can find somebody saying, "Meh, it's fine, I guess. It's good enough. It's not
Yeah.
great, it's not bad. It's fine."
Well, that's why we're doing this show because that's my default response to basically everything.
It's meh.
Eh,
It's good
whatever.
enough. Yeah. There's actually been a couple of movies that we've watched recently that I can't bring any up off the top of my head where we watched it and we got to the end of it. It was like, it was okay. It was fine. I'm glad we watched it. I don't think I'd watch it again, but it's fine. And the internet will be like, it's the greatest movie ever made, or it's total shit because this. I don't know. That bugs me.
Yeah.
So, Firefly, rumors.
So Firefly. There are rumors I've heard now. Some of it is just you know taking quotes and running with it, and some of it is supposed inside rumors that there are people that have actually been exploring the potential for bringing a Firefly show back. So I'd like to do a couple of things. One, talk about whether we think they should or shouldn't.
Go.
Two, make the assumption that they should or will,
Okay.
and discuss how to go about doing it. But before we get into that, I assume you're a fan of Firefly.
Oh,
I
I
know that
love it.
you've basically designed your whole D&D character in our campaign around
Yep.
Malcolm Reynolds, and maybe not him specifically as a character, but like the role that
Kinder,
he
gentler,
fulfilled
ma.
on the show.
Yeah.
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 Well, we'll see how kind and gentle you are when I throw some shit at
Oh, I mean, you throw a mouse in front of me and I'll fuck shit up.
you. So before we get into to should they and why and how, uh, why did you like Firefly? What made it special to you?
It was it was kind of unique. Like most shows that I get into and enjoy, one of the things that I liked about it the most is that the characters in the show were not and Joss Whedon was very good at this in pretty much everything he did, with maybe the exception of Dollhouse, where all of the characters had sort of a complex set of motivations. And it's definitely something that people playing Dungeons and Dragons can take away from, because you look
Hmm.
at Jane, right? Jane is neutral evil. A case could be made, right? He's not really interested in causing chaos, and he's not particularly caring about the rules. He does what he does for his own particular reasons, and he will go along with his friends as long as that doesn't interfere with his goals. Um, I kind of and I kind of fell in love with Kaylee, right? I think the whole world did, because she was
Hmm.
just the perfect character. The just like the interactions between the characters felt like they resonated. Like these are real. This is how real people would act. I especially love, like, Nathan Fillion is a fantastic actor. I mean, watching him take this. I'm a tough guy, but I'm also, I have feelings, and I'm a kind of a big softy on the inside. But also, I'm not afraid to look silly.
Hmm.
That was that was a big thing, and I think it's kind of a step forward for, like, one of my pet peeves about the world is the way that we've embraced the idea of toxic masculinity, right?
Hmm.
Men got to be tough and strong and never laugh and never cry, and the only emotion you're allowed to have is anger.
Hmm.
Um, and this was a character that was like, no, this is like a fully fleshed out human being. Yes, he has flaws. Yes, he gets angry. Yes, he does stupid things. Yes, he makes mistakes. But in
And the
general,
comparison to that, the obvious comparison is Han Solo. Like, if you were to describe in two sentences those two characters, it'd be like you're talking about the same thing, just sort of the roguish archetype, blah, blah, blah,
kinda,
occasional
yeah,
quip, yada, yada, yada. But Malcolm Reynolds had a depth to him, and a
yeah,
depth that was communicated in the span of,
6 episodes,
yeah. Yeah, I
yeah,
mean, after the first couple of episodes, you got it. Um,
yeah.
uh, Serenity, the movie was another thing entirely, and it's a bit of a leap, but it probably would have made more sense if we'd had a lot more Firefly kind of before it.
Yeah. Well, it retconned a few things and swapped some things around, and I was okay with that, because it's a
I like
movie,
it.
right? You've got to,
Yeah.
yeah, it was good. Mm.
So here's one of the things that I like about Firefly, and it's sort of what I like about sci-fi in general. I struggle with sci-fi because sci-fi by itself, I mean, what is it, and why is it entertaining?
Well, it's
There's
speculative fiction.
certainly speculative fiction, okay, and there's certainly more, quote unquote harder sci-fis that, like, I've enjoyed. I love The Expanse, for instance. But where sci-fi excels for me is that it is a good vehicle for exploring characters and narratives that you would have a hard time even just suspending your disbelief to explore in a more contemporary setting, or even exploring in like a historical setting with the context of everything that today. Like, there's not a lot of new westerns being made today, right?
Yeah, there's probably a good reason for that.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, you could still do westerns in a way that gets rid of some of the baggage, gets some of the abject racism and horrible things that were prevalent in those times. But you could do westerns in a way that could potentially appeal to a modern audience. But I think the general audience that wasn't a fan of westerns would still struggle to get into them. But slap some sci-fi lipstick on it. You create a
Firefly. Yeah.
you create a world where, like, the premise of it, whether you want to go western, whether you want to go dystopian, whether you want to go just weird and crazy, the fact that it's sci-fi and there's that sort of disconnection from my reality
Mm.
makes all sorts of, like, story arcs and narrative arcs and even sort of moral shit much more palatable. You go back to a show like Star Trek: The Next Generation. We'll
It's
ignore the
hard to
first
watch.
season because it was utter terrible trash.
It wasn't
And
trash,
I
but
love
it was
the first
weak.
season was bad, and most first seasons for Star Trek were pretty bad. But if you strip the sci-fi away from TNG, what are you left with?
Oh, it's a moral what's the word I'm looking for? It's like a fable kind of
Yeah.
or a it's a story with a moral at the end of it.
Yeah, like you could be watching an episode of Family Ties or Full House or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, those shows had their day, but they wouldn't be for me today, you know. But
No.
all of a sudden, you slap that sci-fi lipstick on it, dress it in a little Star Trek cosplay, and I'm
Mhm.
into it. And then I find value in the story that you're really trying to tell, the ideas that you're trying to explore that I would be less receptive to or open to if I wasn't already suspending my disbelief because it's sci-fi. And I think that's one of the things that made Firefly so great because yes, it was technically sci-fi, but
It's a western.
it was a western, it was setting itself up to be an interesting sort of political thing. Like the world itself that we really didn't get a chance to explore was intriguing, you
Hmm.
know.
It's
For
an
some
old trope done well.
Yeah, you know, and for some of the reasons that I like uh the Expanse, like Firefly was sort of a like a near future kind of sci-fi. Like I can see how we got from point A being today to point B being that, you
Like
know.
10 years from now.
Yeah, like not a big leap. Um and yes, you know, I agree with you on the character thing wholeheartedly. You know, people ask me like shit like what kind of books do you read? And I often go back to, you know, I mean, I'm not reading as much as I should anymore, but some of the stuff that I hold most dear is some of the stuff I read in my youth that is like juvenile and
Yeah.
linear formulaic garbage.
Yep.
You know, David Eddings, my favorite author. He's not a good author. His books are not great, but like Firefly, his characters had a certain thing about them where they were tropes. You lean into the tropes and then you give them nuance, right?
Yeah, you lean in hard.
Yeah. And his characters in his early fantasy stuff, Belgariad, Malorian, Elenium, and Tumuli series, did that in a way that the Firefly, the writing did, you know, the characters and the fleshing of those out did with me. Now, the question, you know, about Firefly is it's like the reverse Star Trek, where a Star Trek show usually started out bad, found the show in seasons 2, seasons 3, and then wrote it about as far as they could ride it. So, to answer, should we make a new Firefly? The question is, do you think Firefly would have continued to be as good as it was if it had had two, three, maybe even four seasons?
Two or three, I think so. I don't think it would have been good to carry it much beyond that without changing something. And that sort of leads me into first of all, I'd like to make a comment. The one thing that Firefly did that no other show before or since, go ahead and send some email to tell me why I'm wrong. Uh, is they made a plausible reason why every single planet looks like Southern California. I've literally never seen that before. Every other
Yeah.
time it's like, well, there's Southern California. Isn't it amazing how much Mexico looks like Southern California? And of course it does. But
Mhm.
isn't it amazing how much Spain looks like Southern California? Hey, wow, look, we're in the south of England. It looks a lot like Southern California.
Mhm.
And in Firefly, it was just like, okay, yeah, they're terraforming the planet. It looks like Southern California. That's perfectly reasonable. I mean, so should we bring it back in its like bring it back exactly as it was? No,
No.
absolutely not. I think it would ruin the magic of what we've already got. Uh, but I could see there's a little bit of baggage there with some accusations that came out about Joss Whedon, and I'm not sure that
Mhm.
as many people would get behind it as have done before, including myself. But
Mhm.
I mean, the world has promise, the stories and the characters. It would be kind of neat actually to do something a little bit like what they did going back with the sort of spin-off Star Wars stuff. Um, done better, of course, because some of this the spin-off Star Wars stuff is. Hmm. But if you did something where it's like, okay, these are stories that are obviously set in these places, and rather
Hmm.
than, hey, let's go back to the same four planets that they did on the Firefly series, there was also an interesting thing that they did where there was an explanation of why there weren't like a million planets,
Hmm.
right? And that's a problem that comes up a lot with Star Wars. Is that like, hey, we know that there are thousands upon thousands of planets. Why is every story set on Tatooine?
Hmm.
Like they shouldn't all be set in the same place. Oh, hey, look, here's Luke Skywalker again. You know him, right?
Hmm. And
Um,
I think
so
Firefly lends itself well to doing that, not just because of sort of the world that they created, but
mm,
also it's an unfinished world. Like, the
yeah,
problem with Star Wars is we've already saved the galaxy,
yeah.
so
Tell us
what do you
tell us
do
a
from
different
there?
story. Well, here's the thing is that there's so getting sidetracked onto Star Wars. One of the things that I would like to see if Firefly came back was rather than, hey, it's the story of of Serenity flying from planet to planet trying to make it something of itself. It should be somebody else doing something else in that setting, and occasionally either interacting or crossing over, a little bit like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. Like it
Hmm.
would be interesting to see something like that in the Firefly universe.
Yeah, and I think that's the best way to do it. I'm not sure
Yeah.
it's the way that like anybody would pay for doing it,
No, absolutely not.
especially if Nathan Fillion's involved. Like, I don't think people would
He
be
would
happy
like
with
you.
him just being a director, producer, showrunner kind of thing.
I think they would have to have a whole bunch of cameos from the original cast. Like they would have to have things where like like every couple of episodes, it's like they're on the planet
Mhm.
where River was being burnt as a witch, and they're watching this happen. Like, oh my god,
Yeah,
or
that'd
something
be
like
one
that.
way to do it. Um, I think if I were making the show, I would be inclined to leave what happened in the show and the movie basically alone. Now, I think you'd get a better quality show if you just like another sort of ensemble cast doing their own thing in
Yeah.
that same world. I think what would realistically happen is you have to involve Nathan Fillion. I don't think anybody else from the show is necessary beyond maybe some occasional cameos. Ron Glass has passed away, so he can't make it in. You've killed off Alan Tudyk's character, Wash. May he rest in peace.
Yeah.
But
He
I
did a
think
lot
you
on the
could,
convention circuit.
yeah. Did you ever watch Con Man, incidentally?
I watched a couple of episodes. I couldn't
Okay.
get past the guy asking for his autograph under the bathroom stall. I've watched that 5 or 6 times, and every time I'm just like, man, please tell me this is not real. This is probably a real life story that they're putting on film. Like, leave the man alone. He's trying to take
Yeah.
a
At
shit.
the very least, finish the first season. The second season, I mean,
Yeah,
it's not required viewing, but the first season was pretty great.
yeah.
And you absolutely believe that most of that stuff is based on an
Oh yeah,
exaggerated version of shit that's happened. Anyway,
yeah,
getting back to Firefly, I think you could do a show with Nathan Fillion, Malcolm Reynolds as a future version of himself. So
yeah.
if you set it after Serenity, right? Like, it's reasonable to suspect that, like, as much as they left it off in like a, hey, we're just kind of continuing our journey and we're gonna continue to fly about and do our thing, it's reasonable to suspect that that crew may not have been able to stay together. Also, based on what happened in Serenity, I think it's reasonable to suspect that, rather than the Alliance, trying to hunt down River because of what happened in the movie, uh, that Malcolm Reynolds himself would be very much a wanted man, and he may have chosen to sever ties with his crew for his own protection, or for their own protection rather, at that point. So it would be interesting to explore Malcolm Reynolds after the events of the movie, as an older man, aged up appropriate to what Nathan Fillion is now, with a new crew. Maybe
I
they're.
I like the idea of just like flipping the whole thing on its head. Like he's not a ship captain anymore. He's now a crime boss. So he
Mhm.
takes over for what was the guy's name with the bowler hat?
Badger.
Badger. So he
Yeah.
takes over that kind of a role, but in a much classier way,
Hmm.
where he spends most of his time behind a desk, but every once in a while there's something that happens that he has to go out into the field to fix. Right? Then you could have like a whole new um, group of people actually flying say, multiple ships even, right?
Hmm.
And he could still be involved in all of them without being the sort of front man of the show. And it also brings in a really easy way to bring in the other cast members
Oh, sure.
as cameos, because it could be like, hey, we need help with this, and like, hey, Kaylee, you're designing ships now or whatever, can you build me
Hmm.
something to do this, and stuff like that. Or like, hey, Zoe, this person's being a real such and such, and you're a big time assassin for hire now or whatever, because like she'd be pretty broken after Wash died, right?
She would be.
So maybe she's gone like right off the deep end, and now she's a psychopath for hire. I don't know. It could be a whole lot. So one of the things I wanted to mention, though, going back in the relationship with Star Wars and like, what do? They've saved the universe. Like, there is a whole expanded universe of amazing stories out there that they literally just threw in the dumpster,
Hmm.
probably for licensing fees. But I mean, like, they're spending billions of dollars per film, like sending $100 million or so to the author of something. Like, Timothy Zahn's books were really great.
Hmm.
Um, the whole arc with Luke and Jade, and them having kids and their kids going off to fight aliens from outside the universe,
Hmm.
right? Like, there were some really good stories there that had a lot of interesting things in them that brought in like other planets and other ideas rather than, hey, let's blow up another Death Star. And that's the danger I see in going back to Firefly, is that things in Hollywood cost so much money now that everybody who makes these things are massively risk averse. They're not interested in doing something new. They want to rehash the same. This is the reason why we get the Dukes of Hazzard, the A Team, stuff from the 80s. Remember this? We're going to sell you your own nostalgia. So if they brought Firefly back, they'd probably try and reboot Firefly with all of the exact same things and make the exact same show again. And it would not, like, you literally have already let the genie out of the bottle. You
Hmm.
cannot do it again. You have to do something different. And that really is my argument for not bringing it back. Like, I would love for it to come back. I would love for it to have gone 3 or 4 seasons for us to have a more complete story arc. I would love to see more of it. I don't think we can. Because whatever we get, it would be okay, but it wouldn't be magical again. So that's how I feel.
All right. You want to move into tabletop?
Sure, let's do that. Oh,
Oh, wow. Table Talk is part of the show where we get to nerd out about things dice, dungeons, sometimes dragons, share whatever's on our mind related to tabletop gaming. Telson, I heard you say that you have a game tonight.
I do. We are coming back from hiatus. I have no idea where it's going to go. I talked in the episode that shall not be aired about what we did and me shoving the space princess into the black hole because she lied about something something. I don't even remember what my motivations were. I'm playing a cat in that game too. So she upset me momentarily, and I'm like, all right, fine. And I kicked her into the vortex, and she died. The collapse of a galactic empire because she killed a half a dozen people in my village.
So, given the game's tonight, it's safe to say you're not rolling new characters. It's not a new thing at this point.
Yeah, we're continuing on from there. So I have no idea where it's going to go. Same characters, same DM, same space pirate type theme.
Did you
So
have any sort of like looming, sort of overarching stuff that you hadn't explored in that campaign yet, or?
I don't think so. I know that we kind of finished up my character's sort of motivation arc, and I don't think that we've done that with the other characters yet. So there's a good chance that we have all of that to explore.
Hmm,
But I don't know. We'll see where it goes. I'll have something interesting to talk about next week.
I look
Maybe I'll
forward
be
to it.
rolling up a new character. Who knows?
So, we didn't get to have a game this weekend with our group. We had some
Yeah.
family stuff come up, but hopefully we'll be back into it next week. But I did have a game with my other group Tuesday, and I had to kick it off with the talk. Now, I say the in quotation marks here. It was not a big deal. And the reason why I want to talk about this is really to emphasize that, like, DMs and players should probably, like, occasionally have a conversation out of character just to sort of hash some shit out.
Because
So
there's always stuff.
there's always stuff. Now, as a bit of a preface for this, this game that I've been running has been going on for more than a year now. A couple of the players were fairly inexperienced. They weren't outright new, but they hadn't had an opportunity to stick with a full fresh campaign as of yet. The stuff that they'd tried had basically fallen apart after a few sessions. Yeah, the story of everybody getting into the hobby. But a few things were happening because there was some new characters. There's some people players that have very much uh, fallen into D&D through influences like Critical Role, for instance, and expectations can sort of be skewed. I'm not calling out any of my players. I love every one of them, and I'm certainly not mad, But it was time to have a talk. It had been a year since we had our session zero, and we did have a bit of player turnover very early on. We lost a player, we brought somebody in, so not everybody at my table had even had an opportunity to participate in the session zero. Now, I have game rules sort of set up, table rules in the Discord channel that I ask everybody to read, but especially if you're a new player, like, you don't really get what I'm asking for in all of those.
Yeah.
There's a couple of key things that I called attention to. I mean, the TLDR for my table rules is don't be a dick. We're all here to have fun. Everybody gets to have fun, and you get to have fun in that order. And
Yeah.
that's the key part there. And I keep leveling fairly slow for my groups, but we're now at the point where solutions earlier on had to be team solutions, right? We're now at the point where characters are around level 8 with this group, where characters are starting to get some, really kick-ass cool shit depending on your
Hmm.
class. But all of a sudden you have potentially individual solutions to a problem rather than team solutions to a problem. And the one thing that, myself included as a DM, we were not great at was trying to allow a player to say, hey, I've got a cool solution to this problem, but play it out in a way that, like, the rest of the group and everybody was involved in it. It's pretty easy as you get into higher levels for a player to just be like, I got this, guys. You stop playing Dungeons and Dragons for 15 minutes while I take care of this. And that's just not
It can work, but it has to be done the right way. It has to be done in game. Hey guys, I got this. This is what I'm going to do. And then somebody can say, oh, I can help with that, or I can do this. But you have to,
and that's the key part. There has to
yeah,
be the communication there. You need
yeah,
to allow the other party members to kind of, even if it's just like, ooh, I'll be a distraction force, and go
something.
do this
Yeah.
thing. Like, it doesn't need, everybody doesn't need an equal role in every solution, but it can easily, without, no malice, and you're not intentionally doing this. I talked
How
about
big is the
things like,
room?
yeah, I talked exactly. I talked about things like main character syndrome, and everybody kind
Yeah.
of has an idea of what that means. And what I was talking about with my group wasn't the big things that people think of when you talk about main character syndrome. It was the smaller stuff, the stuff that anybody, me as a
Oh,
player,
yeah.
I've done it. Every player's fallen for it, where you just don't stop to think, hey, I'm having fun, but is everybody else having fun too?
You're like a puppy chasing after a ball. You don't think about what am I knocking over? Are there stairs coming up? Am I going to fall over? Is this someone else's ball? You're just like, whoo, ball.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's perfectly natural. And the purpose of our conversation was to just make sure people knew, hey, this is something that can happen, especially as our characters develop more skills, and I should watch for it. And when I have a cool idea that is going to put the spotlight on me, I'm still going to get the opportunity to have the spotlight on me. But, I'm not a one man band.
Yep.
And the reason why I want to bring this all up is that my players are all receptive to it, right? Like, I wasn't being confrontational with them. I'm just like, hey, some of this is stuff that I'm seeing. Some of this is stuff that I haven't seen yet, but I've seen in other games. Some of it is stuff that I just know that we're going to run into as you continue to level. And if we don't stop and talk about it, because especially because some of you are inexperienced players or this is your first long campaign,
These are traps.
yeah, these are traps that and we'll still fall into them, right? We'll have to push the pause button. But one thing I did do as part of this was I introduced a new homebrew mechanic. Now my party in this game, they benefit from one of the characters playing a soul knife rogue, and her psychic bullshit going on. They typically have a group chat, like a psychic telepathic group chat going on. And I think that's a great idea, and it's something that I went out of my way to introduce in our other game,
Yeah.
through some gobbledygook, whatchamacallit, MacGuffin that does
MacGuffin.
it
Yep.
instead. But the intention is, hey, you guys have the ability to talk. Take advantage of it. So the homebrew mechanic was, what did I call it? Psychic time warp or telepathic time warp or something like that, where essentially even if you're in combat, you're pushing the pause button. Any character that is connected to this sort of psychic conversation can initiate it, and you're in this time warp where time slows down, so long as the only thing you're doing is you're discussing stuff. As soon as you go to
Yep.
perform an action or ability, the time warp ends. And I just encouraged my players, like, don't, it's not going to bug me as a dungeon master if you guys want to, like, hatch a plan in the middle of combat, right? i'm
I
not
mean,
i'm not designing combat encounters or non-combat encounters for the purpose of winning myself. Like, I want you to get through this in a creative way. That's how I enjoy the game.
it's an excellent use of positive metagaming. I really like it.
Absolutely. And the other thing, speaking of metagaming, the other thing that I did have to talk about with the players, and again, this is something that maybe creeps up more for experienced players rather than inexperienced players, is the idea that another player around the table should know what your character can do, not just in terms of the abilities that you already have, but the abilities that you're going to gain in the future.
Yeah.
And that's just, unless you've explicitly spoken about it in character, or you're teasing things that, like, I know that, I'm going to get a teleporter. I'm going to get, the ability to make my entire party fly in a level. So, you guys shouldn't be worried about this thing that's happening right now because, like, I'm going to have a solution to it soon.
I mean, that's easy to role play into though, because all you gotta do is,
Right.
oh, like we need to be able to fly. I'll start researching that, and then like out of character, when I level up, I'll learn this fly spell.
Yeah, exactly. And that's another kind of meta that, like, you're turning what would be a bad meta, the expectation that players should know what your character can and can't and will eventually be able to do, and turning it into a role playing opportunity.
Yeah.
And my guys were extremely receptive to that. So again, the point of bringing it up is, if you're a dungeon master out there, and I'm not an experienced dungeon master, so take my
You do
advice with
pretty
any
good.
grain of salt, but don't be afraid to plan time to talk with your players. Don't wait for something to happen where everybody's pissed off at each other and there's drama to then deal with it, right? You can get out in front of some things that you might sense are coming, or you got a gut feeling for, and redirect that energy into something positive. Your players will be much more receptive when you're not pointing a finger at them saying you done
Or,
fucked up.
or saying no, you can't do that.
Right.
I saw an interesting thing the other day that was a discussion about like it's a lot of it gets talked about a lot to when you're doing role playing to say yes and
Hmm.
right? Just to give people an opportunity to sort of respond or expand or to keep talking, to leave things open ended. And I didn't particularly like where that conversation went exactly, but there was an interesting idea that came out of it, and that was it's also equally valid and probably necessary to sometimes say no, but
Hmm.
right. So instead of saying like yes you can do that, and then what or whatever, or inviting someone to sort of tack onto that, to say, no, you can't do that, but here's this other thing that you could do, or here's this other idea that you could pursue, or you know
Yeah,
and
and I
that's
think that
that's mostly coming from the DM, right? It's like, no, you
yeah,
can't do that, but here's another thing that you can do, or here's something that you should remember from previous role playing
yeah, like
stuff.
generally I don't think a DM's response should just be no. Period.
Right.
Right? Because
Almost
that's
never.
not fun. But I think you can redirect, like, when a player, whether they're experienced or not, is like, hey, can I do this? You know, often it isn't, their motivation isn't that I want to do this specific thing. Game
It's, I want
breaking
to
be damned.
accomplish this task. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to accomplish something. I want to personally feel like I'm making a difference here for the party.
Yes.
And it shouldn't be too difficult as a DM to sort of redirect that energy into something that fits better with the game, with the party.
It's so often, like, it's funny that now that we have these sort of online role playing games to watch, the improvement that I see from people that I've been playing with for quite, and in my own play as well.
Mhm,
Because there's just like, there's different ideas about how to do it, because I played with the same group of guys for years and years and years, right? And it was always very much, this is how the game is played. And having seen the way that some other people do it, you get sort of other options. And one of the things that comes up is, like, it used to be everybody was trying to keep their things secret because we were all kind of playing against each other a little bit. And seeing and hearing people talk about, rather than say, okay, I want to use this ability and I'm going to roll these dice and this is how that works, to say, this is what I would like to accomplish and here's how I would like to go about doing it. Like, hey, I want to know if this guy is lying. Can I roll an insight check?
mhm,
As opposed to, I roll an insight check to see if he's lying, right? Which, as the DM might be, well, I mean, you can roll if you want, but you're not going to succeed because you're not going to be able to tell,
mhm.
because it's important to the story that you not know. Um,
Yeah, and one of the specifically insight is one of those things that I don't want to say it
yeah,
drives me nuts. It's a thorn in my side. And
it's
even
a
in your game,
problematic.
no, even in your game, and some experienced players there, when a person is asking to roll insight, my first question back to them is, "What is it that you're trying to do, or what are you looking
Yeah,
for?"
yeah,
With an insight roll, if you can narrate that the role and whatever happens as a result of that role in wrapped up in the context of the character's experiences, right?
yeah,
Hey, you spent time as a sailor before. You've worked with these types of people. You're used to people being deceptive or whatnot in these particular ways. So these are the type of cues that
yeah.
you're looking for. And oh, look, you rolled an 18. You know what?
Some,
This is right out of the sort of shady pirate playbook. you know
yeah,
like you've seen this before. You recognize this type of deception, and now it's not, are they lying, yes or no? It's like, do I have reason to be suspicious of this dude?
yeah. As opposed to, well, hey, this is a guy from Wall Street. Yeah, well, I'm a sailor. I have no idea. He could be
Right.
telling the truth. He could be lying. I have no context to understand.
And I think as a dungeon master, like, you can almost turn, like, you can connect those dots in a lot of circumstances, right?
Yeah,
So if it's a person that was a sailor, like, that, they have to sell their shit eventually, so they're dealing with sort of fences and shady people. So
yeah,
you can usually find something, but you are going to run into those occasional circumstances where it's like, I'm going to let you roll for this, but
but
you
you have
got
no
to know
idea.
in advance. Like, you're looking at a brick wall here and asking if this brick wall is lying.
Yeah,
If you roll extremely well, I'm going to give you something, but it's probably not going to be all that you're looking for.
yeah. Yeah, 9 times out of 10 too, like, when I'm thinking about rolling inside or asking if somebody's lying, it's like, I'm pretty sure this guy is full of shit based on the narration that's happened. And I just
Yeah,
want, like, an
a
in-game
confirmation.
context. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like, just an in-game context to say, rather than just jumping out and saying, I'm pretty sure this guy's,
you're
shady.
you're a liar.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yes, those jeans make you look fantastic. So,
All right. So the other thing, and a more positive note and more actual role playing in character note, I got to do is have a pretty cool moment with one of my players. I think I mentioned the last time we talked that I'm sort of borrowing your whole champion thing that you were
Oh,
attempting to
okay.
do with our one game. Um, and it started off just as a sort of an unintentional seed where one of my characters, he's one of the new players, and he did the thing a lot of new players do, where it's just, I'm sort of this gruff kind of soldier barbarian dude or whatever. I grunt a lot. I don't speak much. Just playing Geralt or Rivia kind of character, right?
Okay.
Which is great to start. And then he realized, oh shit, like I need more now. I'm a more experienced player. I want to flex my role playing muscles a little bit more. One of the things that I'd set up in my world, and it hasn't come up in our campaign, but it probably will at some point, is that like magic doesn't work the way you expect it to in this world, and neither does resurrection.
Oh.
Death. Um, Essentially, what I did with him is the first time he died. Um, Now, I need to preface this with I killed him because he wanted to be killed. We'd done a little sort of side adventure thing when we were short a player. I actually ran like D&D Mario Kart. It's just a sort of a random thing.
Please tell me
Um,
you use the rules from Trash Pandas.
no, and it isn't entirely original. The Penny Arcade guys with Acquisitions Inc., the C team, did this. Mike Krahulik, and it was a blast. I started sort of with what they did and just kind of made it my own. So it wasn't super original. I just needed something to run while the player was going to be away for a while. And the idea was they were going to compete in this champions tournament, and they won this champions trophy at the end of it. And the champions trophy was basically a get out of death free card.
Oh.
Just I knew it was going to be a fairly low magic world, and I was going to keep them sort of in that sweet low to mid level range long enough that they wouldn't have been able to deal with resurrection on their own. And I'm like, you know what? It wouldn't hurt to have this anyway, just in case I do something stupid, like set up an encounter that like, oh, oops.
Hmm.
Anyway, he came to me and said, you know what? I'd bet nobody else remembers that I've got this thing because it was months ago. Um, you should kill me because like everybody else will freak out about it. And I said, you know what? You're absolutely right. Because it was going to give me an opportunity to explore some stuff that I wanted to explore. So getting back to the original point, death in my world has some mysteries they haven't explored yet. Maybe it's related to the Church of Valoria. But when he died, his soul was separated from the body. And when the resurrection process happened, and this has now come up a couple of times, I essentially had him roll dice at D100. And depending on the roll result, I narrated that like he was in this sort of like sea of souls, and he was competing for other souls for
Okay.
possession of his own body.
Oh.
So he rolled reasonably low, but not too low. Like I don't want this to be punishing, but the way the setup for this worked is that he gained control of his own body, but it
He's
was
not alone.
close, and there was something else that just got in there.
All of me.
Yeah. Now it was great for this the way it worked out for this character because he hit that point where he's like, man, I really want more out of my character now, and I realize I've just kind of painted myself into this corner. Can we do something with this soul thing? Because I'd always left it as like, hey, I'm not going to push this based on the way you rolled. Like this is here, it's flavor at this point. If you want to do something, we'll do something with it. Like if you want to get weird with it. And then I hit a point. This would be maybe about 4 months ago now, and in my campaign where we wrapped up a major arc, and the party essentially it was sort of a werewolfy like lycanthropy type situation
Hmm.
where multiple party members contracted it just through combat and stuff. It had been sort of a thing they'd been doing, and they realized, hey, this could be a boon for us. Like there's advantages to this. And then the rest of the party was like, I'm going to take that on willingly.
Oh.
I played it up like survival isn't guaranteed. The first full moon was going to be this big thing. And the way I set it up with my players was that, look, you've been playing for 8 months. Some of you are new players. I already know some of you want a little bit more out of your character. So here's an opportunity where you can either make the decision to be like, I want to do a new character at this point. This one can die.
Hmm.
There's a built-in mechanism for that. Or if you just want to make some changes to your character based on the fact that this crazy transformation is happening, whether that's just doing maybe some multi-classing or a different dip or whatever. The way this guy sort of played it up was that this other soul that was inside him was a warlock and had a patron.
Oh.
He'd actually We ran a one shot, our group, a couple people from our group, uh, one of those one shot weekends that I tried to do. He spun up a random hexblade warlock, just as a throwaway character, and he's like, well, what if I basically took that character and made it this soul that has been kind of
Oh.
co-residing in my body, and that person has a patron. So I recently took my players going from this sort of low magic kind of weird sort of post-apocalyptic world, not post-apocalyptic in tone, but sort of
Yeah.
functionally speaking, an apocalypse happened, magic, gods, all of those things sort of disappeared, and this is sort of what's left afterwards. And I've thrown them into the Feywild. It had some ties to the backstory of one character. I managed to wrap another character's sort of backstory and motivation into a missing brother, disappeared on this island, Evermeet, Green Isle. I had kind of be this like lost type island that, like in my world, it doesn't exist, but like there's rumors of an island randomly appearing out in the middle of the sea, and you know by the time anybody goes to confirm it, it's gone, and everybody just thinks it's sailors being sailors and tall tales
It's
and
a
whatnot.
turtle.
Yeah.
It's turtles all the way down.
So they followed up on it. The island appeared. They go to the Feywild, and all of a sudden they're thrown in a sort of a very high magic sort of setting. Now it's not the Feywild. I'm not running official material, and what I'm doing is actually sort of an amalgamation of the Feywild and the Shadowfell. There's some sort of convergence happening. But it was at this time that the patron for the soul inside this guy basically pulled him and the other soul aside and said, "Look, this shit that's going on, it's interfering with my own agenda. And one of you's already failed me. Two of you better not fail me." So he became this champion of like this really dark sort of like I haven't fleshed it out yet, but I'm envisioning it being more of like a kind of a Cthulhu-esque kind of like old one style thing. And that was sort of the impetus for doing this champion thing. Um, Another player who plays a druid, so this is not a reach by any means, who was from the Feywild and Evermeet, and is now just coming back to it because it's the first time she's been able to. Um, she's kind of become a champion of nature. Now, I didn't have any logical sort of connections to make with some of the other players. So the next champion that I came up with, and the one that this whole long spiel is about, uh, context for, is there is a particular. I don't know if it's a popular thing in like the 5e version of the Feywild. There was a Hexblade Warlock patron in, I think, 4th edition, called the Lady of the White Well. And it is sort of a like a Feywild Dungeons and Dragons take on the Arthurian Lady of the Lake. Sort of.
Steal from the best.
Yeah, she was a character who had been born as a result of like deception and infidelity by some very, very like powerful, important, ancient people, like God of the Elves level shit.
Okay.
And because of some shit that went down, it involved like Lolth or something. I don't know. I'm not really borrowing any of that, but she's been, since the time she was a baby, essentially exiled and bound to this lake, this sort of glowing white lunar lake kind of thing, in search of love and a champion.
Oh.
Now, this woman would be more ancient than most of what people would think of as being like, high level NPCs involving the Feywild, like the whole Seelie Unseelie court kind of stuff. Like that's all happened long after this Lady of the White Well existed. The leader of the Seelie court and Summer court, court of stars, like as a child she would have gone and visited this Lady of White Well.
Oh.
So incredibly ancient. We'll see how powerful she is, but the general idea is that I wanted to get weird with it in choosing your champion. The character that I gave the option to serve as her champion is it's a funny character. Like just the way it's played out with him, uh, and the way Vicky sort of played him out. As Trip is a Sylvan. Uh, he's sort of some of the lycanthropy stuff. Is a sort of multi-class of a bard and the Matt Mercer Blood Hunter
Okay.
homebrew class. Anyway, that doesn't matter. The history of this character was that like he was sailor turned werewolf, worked in brothels, like very very like open about being, I was a prostitute slash escort kind of thing, and has played that out in a like almost a non-literal way, sort of like this is just the shit I did. I don't talk about it too often. I'm not embarrassed by it. They don't play their character as like overly sexual, quite the opposite, like super almost awkward when it comes to like themes of romance and stuff like that. And we've had an opportunity to explore it a little bit. And for anybody out there, if you're a DM, if you're going to explore anything like this, sexuality, romance, stuff like that, talk to your players first, make sure you're doing it with permission, make
Uh
sure
huh.
they're in on it. They
Yeah.
were in on it. When a player comes to you and says, yeah, I was a prostitute, like in a past life, you
Yeah.
basically
That's
have to have that conversation right away and like, okay, so what themes are you comfortable talking about here related to your character's story? What are you comfortable exploring? And it's turned out to like not matter too much because the character, the way it's played out, is like when it really gets into like a socially sort of tense situation, they start fumbling and stumbling all over themselves. Like the character has developed a bit of a crush on one of the other player characters, and it's
oh,
turned into kind of not an outright love triangle, because I don't think any of them will actually ever explore a romance between characters out of it.
that can be
But there's
awkward.
been there's been some minor jealousies because of some stuff that the player, the object of this character's crush, has had to do with another player, just to like role play out, oh well, god, we're pretending to be at this sort of weird like dinner party kind of thing, and we're playing husband and wife, and they've been put in a
Oh,
situation where they've had to sort of socially like be convincing about being husband and wife, while this other character's sort of watched from the sidelines, and in character develop this little bit of a jealousy.
right.
Anyway, way back in this character's first session, they joined us late to the party. I introduced a magic book that it really did nothing except like it had some writing on the side. They couldn't open it, but there was like a glyph that almost like winked at them, just took a special interest in them. They took the book, and it where it gets weird is that like I've played it up like this book has been watching this player's character sleep, and it's almost like a pet.
Uh huh.
So as part of this champion thing, I've decided to run with it, and it's turned out this book was somehow tied to this lady that is basically tied to this well in the Feywild and has been searching for a champion, and this is one of the ways that she's done it. And finally, Trip, along with the rest of the party, show up at the shores of this white well, sort of a big glowing lunar lake kind of thing. And it turns into a scene basically out of The Little Mermaid. Like that scene where they're in a boat, like, she basically leads him right into the water. The rest of the party just sees them walk into the water and disappear. The character finds them in the boat in the middle of the lake, and they're just kind of spinning around with all sorts of magical, wonderful shit. You know, I actually joked, and somewhere a crab starts singing.
Under the sea.
Yeah, yeah. And it he got awkward in that situation, and then I had the opportunity to play up. Oh wait, this isn't this. I'm trying to get into the mind of this NPC. I'm a bajillion years old, but like I have no social skills. I've got this sort of teenager level kind of high school kid crush on somebody who I've been watching in kind of a creepy way, right? I'm looking for my fairy tale champion and perhaps love that I want to give my heart to and get their heart in return. And how do I impress this person with no experience and skills, despite being a bajillion years old? So it turned into this sort of fairy tale, sort of floating around in a boat in the center. Then it turned into, wait, no, he was a former escort slash prostitute slash exotic dancer. So then it shifted into this sort of like exotic dance type scene where the character was sitting, and this lady of the lake was trying to dance around him, but like have a conversation, a normal conversation while it was going on about needing a champion and being bound to this lake. And it just turned into this super awkward but yet super charming kind of thing where ultimately the player's like, you know what, fuck yeah, I'll be your champion.
Oh.
I feel a little bit insecure myself because of what's going on with this other character that I have some interest in. Somebody showing me some genuine affection is absolutely awkward and kind of creepy as it is. And I'm going out of my way to be overt with it. Like,
Hmm.
this is cartoonishly creepy, not like creepy. And it's just the kind of character that I've never had a chance to kind of work into my games as of yet.
I mean that it's a neat idea. I just going back to the idea of high school. I mean, is it possible to have a high school crush and not be creepy?
Well,
Like I'm not sure it's possible.
I don't know. Now, I do know people that like eventually married their high school crushes and
Hmm?
like have had long marriages that seem relatively normal. I think that's
Well,
probably the exception to the rule.
I kind of a bit. No, and I'm
Yeah.
not talking about like it's just like because like our brains are not really fully formed yet. Like,
No, no.
the fact that our brains don't fully finish growing until we're in our mid 20s is still mind-boggling to me.
Hmm.
But just the idea that like I did, because I was, oh man, I was an awkward high schooler, super super awkward. Like I had no idea how to, and I still don't know how to talk to girls, and I'm almost 50. But like just some of the ideas that were sort of given to us by the media of the time, especially in the 80s, like oh my god,
Hmm.
like teenage romance comedies in the 80s were like this is a manual of how not to do it. Like just
Hmm.
watch those movies from the 80s and go don't do that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it fits so perfectly, especially because like no matter how old we are, like when we start role playing, we kind of role play our teenage selves.
Hmm.
It's like we want to step back into those shoes of when we were young and innocent and didn't know anything from anything. So that's super neat. It's also, I mean, it's kind of a thing that shows up a lot. Like if you think about it, like that's Twilight.
Hmm.
Sorry to throw that analogy in there because I mean I know a lot of people hate Twilight. I love the
Everybody's
books.
fan fiction for everything.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. I mean it's Twilight, it's Buffy, it's like it's the original Dracula, right?
Yeah.
Like Dracula falls in love with is it Mina? What is the
Oh, I don't.
character
But any love
Harper?
at first sight, anything like the concept of
Yeah,
love at first sight in general, right? Like,
I mean love, no, lust, sure. You know,
mm,
you fall in love with somebody by getting to know them and actually knowing who they are. Ah,
yeah. So
man.
anyway, for me as a DM, and I hope for her as a character, like as a player and her character, I think it's going to be fun. Like, I'm not going to make a huge deal of it aside from sort of the initial splashy kind of setup. I will certainly let the player decide where they want to go with it. but taking this character that you would think would be worldly based on their backstory, but they're not.
Hmm.
They have never formed lasting connections with anybody, really.
It's important to note that just because you're old doesn't mean that you're mature.
Right. And this character, the lady of the white well, is the extreme case of this, because she is
Yeah.
probably thousands and thousands and thousands of years old.
This is
And
a an argument I've heard for the Lord of the Rings TV show.
mm,
Because in like at this point, it's before all of the Lord of the Rings stuff in the movies happens or in the books. And Galadriel is thousands of years old, but she acts kind of immature at times. And like, there's a lot of people like, oh, she's thousands of years old. She should know better. Yeah, I mean, isn't that sure? But I mean, point to anyone in their 50s and 60s, and you can find something stupid that they've done, and they're old enough. They should know better. But it isn't always the
it
case.
isn't about your age. Sometimes it's about your experience. And this poor woman, sort of bound to this lake, she's got no experience. She's trying to have game, but she's got no experience, and it was fun. And if nothing else ever comes with it, it just turns into sort of a standard sort of patron type thing. I'm fine with that. But for 25 minutes at the end of our session last week, you know, role playing out a
1,000-year-old or million-year-old, lady of the lake with a boombox above her head, wearing a trench coat in the street.
in the style of the Little Mermaid, it was
Yeah,
great.
yeah. Speaking of the Little Mermaid, why didn't she just actually just write something down to say blah blah blah? I don't have a voice. Let's communicate this way.
Then the movie couldn't happen.
I would be okay with that. I mean, The Little Mermaid is a fine story, but there's so many plot holes. The moral is good. I like the moral at the end of the story, but like there's some problems there.
Yeah,
The theme is communication is important.
it's true. It is true. Well, you want to get into the pod bag?
Yeah, let's answer some questions. I'm going to turn off the noise on my phone.
You've got mail.
Uh, gets me every time. It's time to wrap up the show, as we always do, with questions from the audience. If you'd like to submit your questions, hit us up by email, podbag@nerdingundertheinfluence.com. And we've got a couple more questions from Ian from California this week. They're actually good questions. The ones we looked at before were good too. Are you ready?
Uh, for questions from Ian, almost never, but hit me anyway.
All right. First question. You have to spend 2 years in a room where all your basic necessities like food are taken care of. You have no internet connection. What are the 3 PC or console games that you would bring along with you?
Oh man. Oh, that's a hard one.
Hmm.
I mean, you'd want to do something that had lots of replayability. And like I almost think uh, I think Diablo 2's got to make the list. Just because it's stupid and it's mindless, but you can do it forever.
Hmm.
Um, like you're not really doing anything new. You're just going through it again. Because I mean, I still play it. I still every once in a while just load it up and go, "Wow, this looks awful. Let's play some." I'm trying to think of anything that I've really gotten a lot of mileage out of over the years. With no internet connection, it's tough. Are we?
Yeah, so let's ignore games like, let's just talk single player games, like ignore the fact that some DRM requires you to be connected to the internet. Well, can
That
you
was
play
my
this game
question.
as a single player? Yes. We'll
Right.
assume that you can bring it for this exercise.
Yeah. I don't know. I think I'd want to have like a couple of different genres of game too. So like I've got kind of a role play type thing. Like I'm thinking like there's got to be a shooter that comes along It wouldn't be Unreal Tournament. No matter how much practice I get, I'm still never beating you. So I don't like that game doesn't exist anymore. It's like the first three Star Wars movies. It happened, but it doesn't. That's we don't acknowledge it. Something like Call of Duty, one of the older Call of Duties, or what's the other one that came out? Call of Duty, the original Call of Duty came out, and there was one that was War something.
Like Medal of Honor.
Yeah, Medal of Honor, something like that. Something old enough that it's meh.
Hmm.
And I think I'd probably want to bring a third one, something that I've always wanted to finish and never finished, something like Baldur's Gate,
Hmm.
because I've never finished it. Like I know how it ends, but I've never finished it.
Yeah, I don't know what I would bring. It's a funny question because like if you're thinking about it ahead of time, it's like what problems am I attempting to solve with this game selection? I'm looking for something to fill time. I'm looking for something to entertain. Am I looking for something that gives me some sort of facsimile of social interaction? Like
Absolutely not.
like right, like would I want to bring something like a fucking dating simulator or a like the Sims or something where I can kind of create my own social story around it? I don't know. I think one
Oh,
game I would bring would be Minecraft, and I know it sounds like a sort of a shallow selection. You know, it's a sandbox game, you can kind of do anything. But the amount of times that I've like played Minecraft like back before release and got into doing sort of weird shit and then put the game down and then come back to it a year later and do some more shit, and there hasn't been a lot of games like that do it for me. I'm in the middle of one now which I'm actually starting my third playthrough of, Satisfactory, which is sort of technically a factory building game, but it that would be doing it a disservice to call it that. um like if I ever want to get that sense of like I'm actually accomplishing something while not actually having to do real work, it's a good game for that. You know, it flexes the problem solving muscles. It sort of like if you're kind of person that can lose hours into meticulous, like making something exactly the way it needs to be, like you want to be super anal and like a perfectionist about something, Satisfactory is a great game for that. The third game, though, I don't know. I think I would
it's
need something
tough.
with a good story. Saying like Witcher 3 would probably be a cop out because like
There's a trouble though when you think, because I was thinking about story games too, and there's a problem there in that like once you've gone through the story, do you really want to go through it again? So I was trying to avoid things with a story in them because the story is interesting once.
yeah, I don't know. I guess anything that has a branching path for your character might
If
be
there's
more
an actual
interesting.
difference.
Well, yeah, and most of them don't have that. But like, you know what? You're 2 years locked in a room. Like, superficial difference is enough at this point. You're desperate.
Yeah, fair.
You know, I don't know that I could do Diablo. Like, I loved Diablo 2 back in the day, but like, I've never found another game that sort of like I don't have that itch anymore. And every time you try to get into Diablo 3, try to get into, oh, what is it called?
I'm actually playing Diablo 3 right now, going through the new season.
Yeah, I can't think of the name of the game. Um,
I think I know the one that
Torchlight,
you mean.
Torchlight, yeah, Torchlight
Well,
2. I think it was sort of a like a Diablo 2 like, not as in depth or complex as Diablo 3, but you know, just the mechanics of like click 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 click.
mhm.
I don't.
Path of Exile was another one,
Yeah,
which I never played.
I don't know that I would bring any shooters.
No?
No.
I mean, the only reason that they made my list is because they're eminently repeatable, because there's really like it's just the same. It's the same every time. And if you can play it twice, you can play it 200 times. I was thinking about this actually as you're bringing this up, and I'm thinking like, why no sports games, right? Like a golf simulator of some kind, like Tiger Woods 2004 would be.
Yeah, I mean, there's something that like you know I mean the objective is just to get better at the game, and you can always get better at it.
Yep,
So that might be a good choice.
yeah. I think that the important thing is the repeatability of it. Like, how often can you come back and play it again? And that's the reason Diablo made my list, is because
Hmm.
I mean, people are still playing Diablo 1, and honestly, it feels like a beta. It's like, here's one level. Get to the bottom of the temple and kill Diablo, done.
I might play Morrowind.
Oh yeah.
Morrowind had enough meat, and there's so much written stuff that you
Oh
wouldn't
yeah.
normally like. It might take you 2 years to actually play everything in Morrowind and read everything in Morrowind.
There's yeah, or any of the Elder Scrolls games, because you just I mean, I played through Skyrim part of the way. I mean, I've never even gotten close to
Hmm.
finishing it, but I started one playthrough and I'm like, I don't care whatever else I do, I'm going to collect all the books.
Yeah.
Like, I literally made a library and collected all of the books.
Yeah, and the thing with Skyrim, I mean, there's still the book collection stuff, which was great, but like Oblivion and Skyrim, once they got into, hey, we're turning this into a fully voice acted game,
Yeah.
like the character interaction stuff lost a ton of depth. And
Yeah.
like, don't get me wrong, it's more easy to get immersed in a game like Skyrim than it is to get into something like Morrowind. It takes a special kind of masochistic person like me to really love Morrowind, and I embrace it as the best game in the series still. But I think there's enough like text-based meat in that sandwich that like it might take me 2 years just to get through it all.
It's not a bad choice.
Yeah,
Not a bad choice. It's an interesting question.
it is. Ian's second question, and this one is particularly interesting and relevant for me. What do you think about using AI bots like ChatGPT as an aid for developing D&D campaigns and content? Have either of you done this, or are you looking into it? I don't mean having the bot be the DM. Well, maybe, but more so as a tool for developing characters and dialogue and details around setting and ambience.
For me, like, there has to be a sort of an upfront question of like, how exactly is Chat GPT's stuff generated? Because I'm absolutely certain it's not actually AI. It's basically, I'm going to search the internet for the answer to your question.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not searching today's internet, but it was trained on,
Yeah.
the internet from a while ago. I mean, it has a data set, it's a language model that's sort of derived from that. So I've actually done this. Uh, funny
Really?
enough. So I've used it in a couple ways. First of all, I don't think if your approach is, I want to be a DM, chat GPT, do the work for me. What should my
Not
game
going to
be?
work.
That's not going to work. But I've found it useful in a couple of different ways.
I can envision a couple. I just want to jump in because you've got
Yeah.
actual examples. I have a couple of thoughts, and the one is something like, "Hey, ChatGPT, describe a tavern to me," or describe a dwarven tavern keeper. And it gives you some verbiage to go along with that, because that's one of the things that I find a little bit difficult when I am DMing, is coming up with NPCs kind of on the fly,
Hmm.
with any kind of uh, I don't know, depth or detail about them, right? Like,
And
I
it,
know who they're supposed to be, but
mhm. And that's actually one of the areas where I think we're seeing that stuff being integrated into video games. Not so much for writing character dialogue, but a lot of they call it like barks, sort of the around the edges character dialogue. Like you're
mm,
walking through a street and you've got people talking around you, and
hey, that's my
merchants
goose.
shouting shit, or whatever. Yeah, it's being used to write some stuff like that, and I think it does a reasonable job there.
Yeah, it's random stuff.
Mhm. Now, I haven't used it specifically to look for descriptions of characters. I've actually used it in a couple of different ways that are probably not what you think of when you would think of using it for D&D. The first thing I've used it for is brainstorming. Like being a DM, especially a forever DM, is inherently lonely because most of the stuff that you're doing, you kind of need to hold close to the chest. You can't just go talk to your players and say, "So I'm thinking about this as an arc," you know?
Hmm.
And the neat thing about how ChatGPT works, just as a tool, and how it's sort of contextual, and you can sort of have ongoing conversations with it to narrow down stuff, and it sort of looks at the context of your whole conversation before doing its next response. Back just as an experiment when we were running our campaign, and we kind of got into this whole street gang thing that I didn't expect to kind of turn into anything, but it sort of did. I'm like, okay, I've got a couple ideas for where I can go, but I'm really not satisfied with them. Let me open up Chat GPT, because it literally launched the day I was doing prep. And
Oh,
I'd signed up for an OpenAI account, and went in, and I started having a conversation with it. Not what should I do with my campaign. It was a bunch of me saying, here's what I've done so far for my campaign. Characters have done this. They've got involved with this gang who has this leader and has done this things. And then I asked it, what interesting directions could I take this that players might find enjoyable, just to get sort of alternative prompts. Like, when you have a conversation and you're brainstorming with a person, like, most of the best ideas come almost accidentally out of you say something that gets my mind going in a different direction that it wouldn't have
we should use
otherwise.
helicopters.
Right. But often when you're prepping as a DM, you don't have that.
Yeah.
So Chat GPT gave me a person to talk to, and it helped spur some ideas. Some of the ideas it had were good that I wouldn't even have thought of, that I then rounded out myself a little bit more about, okay, well, we've got these competing street gangs, and maybe have this one gang leader make them an offer to betray the other gang, and if they do it, then you could go this way, and if they don't, you could go this way. And I'm like, fuck yeah. The other place I've used it, and I've used it a little bit in both of my campaigns now, is when you have an NPC that you want to be a caricature of somebody else, right? Like, you have a person in mind, where it's like, and going back to your campaign, I would say, okay, have this person say this in the exaggerated style of Werner Herzog. And all of a sudden you have the mediator or fist from our campaign talking about, uh, Fist being a leader in the predator in this urban jungle and stuff like that, where it's like, I know what I want this guy to sound like, but like, it'll take me 17 years to craft, and I don't write a bunch of dialogue, but I like to create, like, when I have an NPC that's going to be important in one session or two sessions, I'd like to try and establish some dialogue prompts. So if the
Yeah.
conversation goes this way, this is the kind of gist of what this character might say. The conversation goes this way, this is what they might say. So I used Chat GPT for some of Fist's dialogue, where it was very much meant to be a cartoonish version of Werner Herzog, as a gang leader for the Crimson Hand in my city. And I mean, I never used any of it verbatim, but it's just like, oh, I really like that turn of phrase. Oh, I like that style, that sort of cadence. Let me massage it a little bit. And the neat thing is, it was a time saver, right? Because it is the
Yeah.
dialogue cues that may never get used.
Right.
So,
And you don't want to write all those out.
right.
Remind me again who Werner Herzog is, because I should know, and I'm having trouble
So
bringing it
he's
to mind.
primarily a filmmaker. He's been an actor in a lot of movies too, but he's the German heritage guy that everybody makes fun of. He's the one that's always talking, uh, it's almost doom and gloom kind of thing. Uh,
Was he in The Mandalorian? Was that him?
yes, he was in The Mandalorian.
Okay. Yeah.
I want to see the baby.
Yeah. I
Or
know who you're
he
talking about now.
played, what was the guy's name, in the Jack Reacher movie, the first one. He's been in a lot of
Oh,
stuff. Anyway,
Jack Reacher movie is sort of exercised from my brain.
yeah, it was all right. It was, meh.
It was okay.
Circling
The
back,
TV show was better.
I haven't watched it yet. I haven't watched it yet. Honestly,
It's worth a
Tom
watch.
Cruise is not a great actor, but like, I can watch him run anytime,
Sure.
and you choose
I
through some
mean,
scenery, and I never
he
feel
works
like I'm
out.
wasting my
It's
time.
fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, he makes good popcorn movies. There's no doubt about that. Tom Cruise is great when he's playing that character that Tom Cruise is good at playing. Jack Reacher wasn't it.
No, no, no. But you know what?
It's
still,
fine.
it going back to the thing you said at the beginning of the show. It's okay for something to be just fine.
Yeah, it's
You know,
fine.
it's a movie that like I've even gone back and watched multiple times because it's like, you know what? I've got time on my hands. Let me fill it with
Uh,
something that isn't
oh
terrible.
God, what's the name of the female lead in that movie?
The first movie
Yeah,
was
there's more than one.
Rosamund. Well, no, the first movie was Rosamund Pike, who played like
Yes.
the lawyer.
Yeah,
The second movie was oh, what's her name?
I did not realize there was a second Jack Reacher movie.
There was a second movie, and it was actually pretty okay too. You know,
Okay.
Uh,
Rosamund Pike is worth watching in that first movie because
yeah.
she's
The second
amazing.
one has oh my god, I'm drawing a blank on her name. How I Met Your Mother, the Canadian girl. She played one of the Shield agents in most of the Marvel movies.
Oh, yes, right on the tip of my tongue.
Oh, I'm gonna
Colby
kick myself.
Smulders.
Yes. She's in the second movie playing basically the person who had Jack Reacher's job when he was still in the military.
Okay, I think I might have actually seen that,
Yeah.
and it's unfortunately quite forgettable.
Yeah. It was all
They
right.
can't. They can't all be Oscar winners. I mean, come on.
No. You have anything else you want to talk about today?
Um, I have an idea, and I'm not sure how far this is going to go, but I kind of want to do a thing where, and
You need no
I don't know, like,
booze.
yeah, well, I need some booze. I have this idea where I want to read stories on YouTube, and I have no idea if it's doable, if it's been done, but just the idea of just sort of sitting down and reading a story, recording myself reading a story. And do you remember way back when we were kids, sometimes they would do things on like Mr. Dress Up, where they would read a story and you would see an illustration, and then it would be like, here's the next part of the story. And they'd
Hmm.
flip the page and there's a new illustration. Something like that. Something without like a whole lot of visual input, but just here's a story.
Yeah, you've talked about like wanting to do a radio serial style kind of
Yeah.
thing. Now there's one that I haven't watched or listened to that Critical Role, the parent company, just bought the rights to. That was supposed to be good. It was on my list of things to go back and watch, and I never did. It was all taken offline, and now they're releasing sort of the first season of it again. I think weekly or something like that. So I'll have to give it a go. Funny enough, had a conversation probably a year back. Another one of my hey, here's a business idea. Let's explore it to the point where we got to actually do work and then never do it again. I was talking about it with Ian from California, actually, of doing something similar, except instead of putting it on YouTube, it was basically going to be reading stories for um, like the Calm app. Have you ever experimented with or seen commercials for those sort of like ASMR kind of like help you go to
Yeah,
sleep, relax you kind
kind
of
of.
stuff?
Yeah.
Either doing user submitted short stories or stuff that's now in Creative Commons or stuff like that. You know,
Yep.
like you can, the technology stack is obviously where I would excel, but it's you can hire people to do the reading and dictation at a fairly reasonable rate. Started prototyping and then put it down.
Yeah, I don't know. I just want to read stuff, and I don't exactly know why. It would first of all, it would give me an excuse to read a bunch of stuff because I was thinking about reaching back into the stuff that has now become in the public domain.
Hmm.
Like older fiction type stuff. I recently started reading Kurt Vonnegut's uh,
Hmm.
work. It's been recommended to me like thousands of times, and I've never read it. And I started reading it, and I'm like, oh boy, because I'm starting with like I started at the beginning, and I'm reading stuff he wrote in the 50s, and the amount of stuff that is sort of predictive of things that are happening today is frightening. But it's written in a very 1950s style, which I used to love, and I'm having a hard time getting back into. But one of the reasons that I want to do it is because it will give me an excuse to actually start reading something, which I haven't done for years.
Yeah, I don't read anywhere near as much as I should anymore. I used to read so much.
Yeah, me
Now it
too.
was not, it was never anything great. Like it was a lot of fantasy and not even good fantasy. Like the sort of,
Oh, pulp. All pulp.
yeah, the kind of like even like David Drake and stuff that was like you can tell this guy had 1 month to write this book, and then he had a contract to write 17 more books in the next 2 years.
Yeah.
Joanne Burton and Tanya Huff, and
I love Tanya Huff's work.
yeah, I haven't read a lot of her stuff, but the stuff I did read when I was younger, I liked. And that's been sort of the big problem with me re-exploring. Like I go back and read my David Eddings stuff every year or two, but going back and rereading a lot of the books that I actually have physical copies for now, it's just like, wow, this is, I see it the way I think other people saw it back then, and I didn't. Sort of juvenile, formulaic.
Sure.
Sometimes it's
But
still feel good stuff, but
yep.
it's,
Yeah, I really there's a lot of Tanya Huff's work. I really enjoy Elizabeth Moon's work.
I don't think I've read her.
Um, I think that she's the one who wrote a book called Paxenarian's Tale, um, which was a sort of interesting, sort of late '80s, early '90s kind of like it's a story with a strong female lead who isn't there because of a man, right? Which was a really interesting perspective for me at the time, right? Because of course, as a teenage boy, I'm like, I have no idea what women think.
Yeah.
I still don't have any idea what women think, but I do know that I don't know what women think, and that's
That's a big
progress.
difference though. Yeah.
Yeah, it's progress. But I mean, like it was interesting to read a story where it's like, okay, this is a woman who does what she wants because it's what she wants, and yeah, there are men in the story, but they're just there, right? Because there's other people in the story. So, and like that's my recollection of the story. It's been many years now since I read it, so it's entirely possible that I've gotten all of it wrong.
Hmm.
But I remember it being pretty good.
Well, we're just going to have to start an official Nerding Under the Influence book club.
Yeah, let's do
So
that.
if you're listening and have any recommendations, send them along.
Yeah,
Podbag, nerdingundertheinfluence.com. Can't
and
promise we'll read them, but we'll read your email.
yeah, we might read the book and then go, man, that was why did oh God. Maybe we should shut this down before it starts. uh,
Well, I think that's a good place to end it.
I think we're
Thanks for
done.
spending some time with me today, man. We'll see you
Yeah,
next week.
it was a lot of fun. We'll see you next week.
Gonna roll that outro.
Bye.
Bye.